G'day guys, it's Possum Petey here. I'm doing a little bit of a different video today. Today I'm going to be walking through my opinions on the Battlefield 6 beta and what I think is good about it and what's not so good. I know that I don't really do a whole lot of Battlefield content on the channel, and that's probably because the recent installments haven't been the greatest. But I really want this one to work. So I've seen a lot of bad takes on the internet so far, so I thought I'd give mine. I've got probably 900 hours or so on Battlefield 4 on the PlayStation. I've probably matched that on the Xbox 360. That's where it all really started for me playing Battlefield. For the more recent installments, like Battlefield 1, got about a couple hundred hours on that one. Battlefield 5, I waited till that game was free before I picked it up, so I've only got about probably 80 hours in that one. But it took them a long time to fix that game. With the most recent installment, 2042, I've got probably 40-50 hours at best there. Yeah, it didn't take me long before I put that game down. But before I get into it, I do want to kind of walk through what's good with the game, because there is a lot of good here and good takeaways for DICE. So we'll go through those first, and then I'll move on to my concerns. So what's good about the game? The destruction and visual effects, first off, look phenomenal. They are on a totally different level to Battlefield 2042. I really feel like that game did lack in the destruction department in a lot of ways. Like, I'm closing into 20 or so hours on Battlefield 6, and I still find myself stopping to look at buildings get destroyed and the destruction. They just seem to crumble differently every single time. It's really cool to see the amount of effort DICE has put into the destruction on this game, and it definitely hasn't taken a backseat in this at all. I think a lot of people are kind of complaining about the desaturation. I like it. It really does. The aesthetic really gives a militaristic vibe, and I think it does kind of help with the immersion that a Battlefield game is supposed to have. The new dragging mechanic, that's pretty cool. A lot of fun. It's something so simple, but I'm sure you've seen all the cinematic moments of people getting dragged out of, firefights by their squad mates, and it's just a small addition, but it just fits so well. Adds an extra dynamic to the squad play and everything like that, which is awesome. The movement is good as well. If you do jump around like a crackhead, you're not going to hit anything, which is absolutely awesome. You don't feel sluggish either. It definitely feels a lot better than some of those older Battlefield games like Battlefield 4. There's sliding and there is diving and stuff like that. But it all fits in well, because if you try and do that while returning fire to the enemy, you're not going to hit shit, which is really great to see. We don't want people jumping around, doing 360s while laser beaming someone across the map. It's not good for the game. Speaking about laser beams, I was actually really worried about some of the guns. They look like they didn't have much recoil and you could just laser beam people. That is certainly not the case for a lot of the guns. There are some guns that once you get those attachments to help with the recoil, they do kind of turn into a bit of a laser beam, but it's not something that DICE can't balance further down the track, so I'm not too worried about it. I'm sure there will be nerfs to guns once the full game's out, making it a bit more in line with all the other guns and whatnot. The character models are a lot better as well. I'm so glad they've done away with the operator system. I am just have my fingers crossed so much that they're going to keep it as closed classes. I don't think they will. You'll notice when you try and load into a game on Battlefield 6, the open playlists are always kind of the first there for people to pick and hop into. I think that's what DICE want, is the open classes. Why they would want that is anyone's guess. To me, it's always been great to have locked classes, because if you want to use certain weapons, you're going to have to switch it up. If you're in a close quarters game and you want to use a PDW, you've got to go to the engineer. If you want to go long range, you want to, be recon, use the sniper. At the moment, the assault class doesn't really have a purpose, and I'll touch more on the classes in my concerns of the game. But yeah, if they were to keep it as closed classes, that would be another big W for DICE. So unfortunately, that is where the list of good things kind of ends for me with Battlefield 6. There are other things they do well, like the gun customization is really good, but the main purpose of this video is for me to express my concerns with what may affect the longevity of the game. To begin with that, the whole game does feel quite downsized. I mean, we have access to 4 maps in the beta, and 3 of them don't even feel like conquest maps. Like, you look at the Battlefield 4 map list, for example, and there's one infantry-based map, and we all know that's Operation Locker, and it's an absolutely banger top 10 map, but it's something that's there to break up the rotation of the map, so you're not always fighting vehicles, and it offers a different type of gameplay. those type of maps should not be at the forefront of Battlefield maps. Battlefield really thrives on those large-scale warfare battles where you've got the tanks, you've got the jets, you've got the helicopters. That's what creates those Battlefield moments. And it might be a little bit controversial to say this, but apart from like the lack of destruction in 2042, those maps actually felt more like Battlefield maps than the ones we're playing in this beta here. At the moment, this beta is kind of reminding me of when Ground War first came out for Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019, where you've got some vehicles here and there, but it still largely feels infantry based. I'm still having a lot of fun on this map. Siege of Cairo is an absolute banger of an infantry map. Iberian Offensive and Empire State, to me, are just write-offs. They're fun, but they're not going to last. A lot of those maps as well are lacking verticality. I think there was a lot of good maps in Battlefield 4 which had you fighting on multiple different levels on really tall buildings, and then there's the ground levels. I think a great example of that is Floodgate. The dynamic of that map, it's still close quarters, it still feels infantry based, but you're also looking at fighting tall on buildings. There's still helicopters flying around, and the dynamic of the map changes when you break that wall and release the floodwaters as well, to where you start to drive water vehicles. At the moment, there's just not much innovation in the maps that change how they play out over time. Yes, the buildings get destroyed. On the one map that we do have that feels like a conquest map, those buildings can get laid out on certain points and the cover's gone, and it does kind of change the battlefield or battlescape over time. But overall, other than that, it's really not a great map. It's a serviceable map, but at the moment, I've got the map list in front of me. We're looking at 4 infantry-based maps out of 9. We do have Operation Firestorm coming back, which is another banger of a map. But we've got this other map here called Saints Quarter, which is described as being only infantry-based. So, like I said, we're looking at 4 out of 9 maps being infantry-based maps. And I'm telling you now, those maps get old quite quickly. In a Battlefield game, I feel like you really do want a maximum of 2 infantry-based maps, at least at launch, in the rotation. Even like Battlefield 1, you had Argonne Forest, and the rest were largely large-scale conquest, vehicle-based maps with planes, tanks, whatnot. I also haven't heard anything about 128-player game modes or anything like that, which is really disappointing to me. I know it had its fair share of complaints in 2042, but I feel like a large reason for that is the maps just weren't designed around 128 players. And a lot of those players were actually filled in by AI and bots, it felt like. And a lot of the satisfaction you get when fighting other players in an online game is you're killing other players. You're not killing, bots or NPCs or AI. You're killing, another person. And that's where the satisfaction comes from. The campaign's there if you want to go shoot bots, if you know what I mean. So I don't think they'd have a problem filling out 128 player game modes when you've got a beta that has 480,000 concurrent players at its peak. It would absolutely be able to maintain 128 player servers. Hopefully when the server browser comes out and admins are able to make their own custom games, that we can see 128 players. I know they are advertising the Battlefield portal quite heavily. So hopefully that will give us the ability to do that. I mean, 128 players on Operation Firestorm would just be awesome, would just be insane. So I've got my fingers crossed that'll be an option down the track, because we know they can support 128 players. They've done it before, but you just don't see a whole lot of mention of it. And it would have been amazing to have a Battlefield 6, modern combat type game with 128 players, with multiple helicopters, with multiple jets. But as I said, it feels downsized. And speaking of downsized, when Rush came out, you're looking at 24 player lobbies. It's like 12 players on each team. What are we doing with downsizing that? I remember playing 64 player Rush on Battlefield 4 in its peak, and the intensity and chaos is exactly what you'd expect from a Battlefield game. You've got 32 players on each team going for only 2 objectives, and it was great fun. It wasn't always the most balanced, but it was way better than a 12v12 scenario. So once again, hopefully when those custom games come out, we will have some level-headed server owners that can make good quality game modes for us to play. And just to circle back and touch on that verticality thing, what I'm talking about with the maps, I joined a game where our squad was able to get onto the rooftops on the Siege of Cairo. You can kind of glitch yourself up there, and the map became twice as more fun. I mean, yes, we were shooting down on the enemies and getting way more kills, but if both teams had access to the rooftops and you could fight on top of them and parachute down to the main floor when you needed to, that map would be just twice as good as it already is. And it's a great map to begin with, but that extra level of just not only having to watch on the ground floor but on the rooftops, it just adds a different dynamic to the firefights, and it's just way more enjoyable overall. Also, another thing that's a little bit weird is the auto spotting. I'm not a massive fan of that. If you were trying to be, it's almost impossible to be stealthy. Like if someone just looks in your direction, it seems to spot you. They've got to bring back the OG spotting, where you actually press the button and your character does the whole pointing animation, points at the enemy or screams out something so small. But I've seen a lot of people want that back, and I'm one of them. I want that animation back of the over-exaggerated pointing and the screaming. I think that would be a way better system than what they've tried to implement with the auto spotting. I get why they've done it. Because of the increased visual effects, it makes it harder to see the enemy in certain scenarios, and it can be a bit frustrating when you're constantly getting shot from places you don't know. So I know why it's there, but I still think the spotting manually would be perfect. Even if they potentially made the spot itself last longer when you spotted someone to help combat the visual issues with the game. Well, not really issues. It's just one of those things that they've got to balance between the upgraded visual effects. I think a longer manual spotting would work better and kind of fix that issue. Another weird thing I noticed is you can't shoot while parachuting anymore. To be honest, I'm not even sure if you could do that in 2042. But ultimately, my main concerns, like I said, is just the overall feeling of the game being downsized. Just 4 out of 9 maps being inventory based. I just don't see that lasting long. Don't get me wrong, I'm having fun on them. They're not the worst maps in the world, but they definitely lack that verticality that you have on some of the older Battlefield maps. I mean, like I said, we go back to Battlefield 4. You've got Dawnbreaker, Siege of Shanghai, Rogue Transmission, all these maps where there is a level of verticality or at least large-scale warfare to them, and we're just not seeing that in, like I said, 4 out of the 5 maps here. There is, like I said, Operation Firestorm coming back. Hopefully that'll be the saving grace along with these other maps. The other maps are described to be larger scale, and I think DICE have even mentioned that themselves, that the maps in the beta are currently the smaller ones they have to offer. Fingers crossed that they do keep the closed class system. I think DICE, like I said, are leaning more towards the open class system, but I find if you do that, you're going to see people that are just walking around with the best class and the best gun or their favorite gun, and you're not going to see them really switching around. Having those locked weapons behind the classes really forces people to change the class based on the scenario to what they want to use or what they feel may be better for that particular situation. So I'd imagine there'd be closed options for private servers and the admins when the server browser comes out. But we'll just have to wait and see how many people play that. Having standardized closed classes, I think, is just the way to go. But like it seems like they are pushing the opposite way. Anyway, that's pretty much my kind of thoughts on the game. Let me know if you agree. If you don't agree and you think it's bullshit, put that in the comments as well. But let me know any points you think that I might have missed of what you think is missing in this Battlefield game. Like I said, my main gripe is just, you look at like the Battlefield 1, for example, as well. You've got those close quarters maps like Army Islands and Argonne Forest, but the large portion of the maps is large scale warfare. And you've got that verticality created by even just stuff like the airship. It just really doesn't seem like they're doing too much innovative stuff here. Like I said, I think that might be more because of the Battlefield 2042 flop that they've had. So I think they're playing a little bit too safe. I think quick additions of new maps would definitely help the longevity of the game. Maybe because the destruction is so detailed and it is so worked in that is why the maps are a little bit smaller. It might be a technical issue as why they're downscaling, but I don't think that's the case. With how smoothly everything's going so far, I don't see why they couldn't have larger maps optimized just as well with more players on them. I think that would be the direction they need to head in. Like I said, if you agree, let me know. Disagree, then also let me know, and let me know your points as well in the comments. But you probably won't get another video of this like this out from me. It's not something I typically do, but I've seen so many bad takes on the internet, and Battlefield is something I'm passionate about and want to see succeed, that I just had to hop on here and say something. But I appreciate you listening if you got to the end. Have a good rest of your day, eh? Bye.